Welcome to the League of Women Voters Tacoma Pierce County Candidate Forum for Tacoma Port Positions 1, 2, and 4. I'm Lydia Zapeta, the moderator, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Tacoma Pierce County and our community sponsors, I want to thank the candidates and TV Tacoma. The candidates in ballot order are for positions 1, John McCarthy and Laura Gilbert, for position 4, Don Meyer and Mary Bacon, and for position 2, Dick Marzano and Elizabeth Pugh. Laura Gilbert did not respond to multiple requests to participate, and we are still missing Dick Marzano. I ask each of you to confirm that you agree to the ground rules, which among other things include addressing the issues and not making personal attacks. Please confirm by giving me the thumbs up. Thank you. I see that all. Thank you very much. I ask you now to please mute yourself and not talk unless it's your turn to speak. Each candidate has up to 2 minutes for an opening statement. After that, the order of the questions will rotate and each candidate will be asked the same question. At the end, each candidate has 1 minute for a closing statement. Our timekeeper today is Susan Eidenchenk of the League of Women Voters Tacoma Pierce County, who will indicate when you have 60 seconds, 30 seconds, and when you should stop. You may finish your sentence when she indicates a stop, but don't push me on anything more, okay? The order of the opening 2-minute statements is in ballot order. So we'll start with John McCarthy, Don Meyer, Mary Bacon, and Elizabeth Pugh. So your opening statement, please, Mr. McCarthy. You're on mute.
Thank you very much for inviting me here today. I very much appreciate the opportunity to talk to all of you. My name is John McCarthy, and I am a candidate for the Port of Tacoma position number 1. I was not on the primary ballot since there were only 2 candidates for this position, so we advanced to the November election. I have served as one of your port commissioners for the past 4 years, and I am seeking re-election. We are at a critical point in decisions about the port's future, development, and growth. We must plan in a strategic way that protects and grows jobs and provides economic opportunity for all of our residents of Pierce County. We also must continue to make conservation and stewardship of the environment a priority. 2 years ago, we began the development of a clean trucks program requiring newer, cleaner trucks into our maritime terminals. This past year, we also developed a long-term clean air strategy and long-term economic strategy for the Port of Tacoma. I started out many years ago working at the Port of Tacoma as a casual longshore worker for 10 years, putting myself through high school, college, and law school. I then served on the Port Commission for 9 years. And after that, I was appointed to be a judge. I was a district and then a Superior Court judge elected to Superior Court and serving in that position for over 18 years. Recently, I returned to my passion, which is the Port of Tacoma. My wife, Pat, and I have 4 children and 11 grandchildren. We have been highly active in many parts of our community. I'm a past board member of the Boys and Girls Club of South Puget Sound. I continue to volunteer at Tacoma General Hospital and also officiate youth and high school football. Once again, I am John McCarthy, and I'm running for position number 1 on the Port of Tacoma Commission. I would be honored to have your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Meyer, please.
Thank you very much. Hello, I'm Don Meyer, and I'm running for re-election to the Port of Tacoma Commission. I appreciate your taking the time to watch these videos to learn about the candidates and to the League of Women Voters to make this happen. I think now more than ever, our port needs proven leadership to ensure we create and protect family wage jobs and that we practice outstanding environmental stewardship. We've reduced diesel particulate matter by 80% and greenhouse gas emissions by 20%. I am proud that I have the experience it takes to make a difference for taxpayers. I was first elected to the Port Commission in 2009. Previously, I served as the Executive Director of the Foss Waterway Development Authority, the Deputy Director of the Port of Tacoma, and as Deputy Director for the Office of Financial Management of the State of Washington. Currently, I am a small business owner in Pierce County. I believe in the value of a vibrant, working waterfront for the benefit of all citizens. Although the port is often called the economic engine of Pierce County, our port must also be about more than jobs. We must be an environmental leader with fiscal accountability to taxpayers. As a port commissioner for the past 11 years, I've worked hard to ensure all decision-making considers the financial, economic, and environmental impacts because they all play a key role in a contemporary port. My priorities for this new term are continued job creation and increasing the port's market share to help improve Pierce County. We must also continue to reduce emissions from port operations facilities while protecting and enhancing critical fish habitat, which is culturally significant and a treaty right of the Puyallup tribe. We also have that responsibility to continue the clean air programs, limit property tax increases, and finish the SR 167 and Canyon Road extension. Serving you as a port commissioner has been a true honor. I would appreciate your vote and your support as we continue to make our efforts to make the Port of Tacoma an economic and environmental leader for Pierce County. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bacon.
Hello, my name is Mary Bacon, and I'm running to be your next port commissioner. My decision to run is based in my belief that my expertise in environmental sciences would bode well as a commissioner. I will provide a perspective missing within our Port of Tacoma Commission, and when elected, I will be the first working scientist to hold a Port of Tacoma commissioner seat. I graduated from the University of Washington, Tacoma with a degree in environmental science, and I have 15 years of experience as an environmental toxicologist and health physicist in the Puget Sound. As the former president of a labor union, I will always advocate for workers and well-paying jobs. Our port's economic and environmental development is an opportunity to promote growth in our community by increasing employment and new business endeavors as our port becomes climate resilient. Combined with my unique background as a scientist who has worked in both the private and public sectors, my understanding and unique insight will be an asset to our commission. In 2016, the City of Tacoma issued the Tacoma Climate Change Resilience Study, and the city is taking the necessary steps to mitigate the identified impending hazards. Similar efforts have not been identified for our tide flats. So when elected, I will call for the creation of the Port of Tacoma Climate Change Action Strategy. The strategy's goals will address climate change, and the concurrent infrastructure development will be sustainable, inclusive, and equitable. The Port of Tacoma has existed for over a century, and my leadership, my experience, and my foresight will ensure our working waterfront continues for another 100 years. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you why I'm running, and I hope to earn your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pugh. You're on mute.
Was not coming off mute. Well, I'm unmuted now. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Pugh, and I am a candidate for the Port of Tacoma Commissioner position number 2. And I'm running to build a more equitable, more sustainable, and a more collaborative port. A port that is responsive to the changing needs of all of Pierce County, from those of us who have spent a lifetime working in the port to honestly, those of us who rarely consider just how connected port activities are to our daily lives. But one thing that I do believe, and I really do believe this, that we have in common is that we all have a desire to be and to do good in the world. And for many of us, I know we find ways to be of service, to do our best work, and support our loved ones through our jobs. And if there's one thing that people know about the port, it's that as an economic engine for Pierce County, there are career opportunities that come through the port that provide rewarding and meaningful work, good benefits, and living wages. Now, I've spent my career with workers in the private sector and job seekers transitioning from the military right here in Pierce County. And the people that I talk to know what they want from their careers: the ability to pay for necessities of food, shelter, water, of course, but also this desire to learn new things, to live out a purpose, to create and to build a better future for their families. So I'm running to ensure that these opportunities remain in the area, and also that jobs can develop and change to meet the demands of the future, and that these opportunities are open to all, even those who have not historically considered a future in the industry. I'm also running to make sure that we can make good on the promises of the 21st century. These are the promises I've been hearing about for as long as I can remember, such as conscious stewardship of our planet's precious resources. We all deserve that promised future where we innovate, collaborate, and celebrate success in growing a modern economy rooted in equity, inclusion, and sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all. Each of you will now have 90 seconds in which to answer the following questions. I will rotate the order of who starts. So we're going to start with Don Meyer. You can unmute yourself. The first question is, the pandemic has demonstrated huge disruptions in supply chains. What can the port do to mitigate some of these disruptions? Don.
First of all, that's a very relevant question, considering we have about, I think it was last count was over 10 ships at anchor waiting to get on berth to be unloaded. The pandemic, when it first started, all of a sudden we dropped off the cliff in terms of activity, and then we've rebounded in such a significant way. I think the real issue that we need to face is finding a better way for our terminal operators to be open longer, like on the weekends. I think those are practical considerations. I think also we need to work with the railroads. Part of the issue we have is what's causing a problem for us to get those ships at berth is the railroads in Chicago are backed up. So we need to work with the railroads, we need to work with our terminal operator, and we need to work with our labor groups. And I think that having more hours for our gate, which typically on the weekends, there's very limited operation. And so I'm an advocate for full utilization, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And I think those are the sorts of things, that sort of initiative is what we must do in order to unclog the system. And I wish it's something that we could just, take a wand and say, okay, we're going to just change these one items. So it's all about the logistics chain. And the problem we have is also ships' reliability in terms of schedules. It's a huge problem because of the COVID situation, let's say in China, where ports are closed up and they have to skip ship calls. So it's a whole host of things, but I'm hoping that we can get better as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bacon, what can the port do to mitigate some of these supply chain disruptions?
Thank you for the question. I had the opportunity to work in a supply chain solution warehouse, and I can tell you that the supply chain is a very dynamic mechanism. And when it is disrupted, it's unlike a rubber band where it just snaps back into place. We're going to see these disruptions and these accordion effects until, I'm guessing probably years. So what we can do if we are anticipating these effects is we can learn from the shortcomings out of the Port of LA. One of the things they've identified is they don't have enough truck drivers to take the material from the port onto the roads. So where are we at? Are we looking at perhaps temporary hires? Are we looking at perhaps contracting? Are we looking at these businesses and asking, are you prepared for this shortcoming? When we talk about laborers and our workers, we can work them and we can work them for 24 hours, but that's not up to us. That's up to the business to negotiate with its employees. So what we need to do is have these discussions with these businesses. Are you having these conversations with your employees? Is there something that we can both reach a mutual agreement on that will be beneficial? Does this have to be long-term and permanent? No, these are all things that could be negotiated, but it does come down to discussions and having real and practical discussions with the folks who operate these businesses in the tide flats, because the port can't wave a wand, as Donna said, and make these things happen. This is going to take time, and let's start now. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth Pugh.
Thank you. So with the opportunity, and I do try to look at these as opportunities because I don't think this is going to be the last time that we're going to see some level of global disruption this century, whether that is based on changes in business and industry, whether it's affected by climate change and things that are happening in the oceans and sea levels. But we are going to see disruptions that either bring things to a halt, and then we play this catch-up game again and again. So in addition to addressing what we need to address now, which is really about figuring out what needs to happen, what's the most effective set of tools. It's also learning for that next experience. And one of the things we're experiencing is in a lot of supply chains, there's typically that pull process, right? Where it's like, this is the demand and it's going to pull everything forward and everything comes forward in that path. And although we know at the end consumer level, that demand is absolutely there, right? People are experiencing shortages on their shelves, but the kind of in the middle of that stream, we're seeing that push action because again, we're not able to have the relationship with the rail, the capacity that we're maxing out there, looking at where we're struggling or our partners are struggling, because as was said, these are not necessarily the port's direct employees, but where our partners are struggling to either have the equipment or basically the people hours, right? And the staff to be able to do the work. So I think it really is working with our partners to understand this and also make sure we're building forward for the future.
Thank you. John McCarthy.
Thank you. It's October of 2021. The two words supply chain are words now that people are familiar with. Society as a whole has come to learn what that means. When this pandemic started about a year and a half ago, the term was not in much usage throughout the United States, and most people really didn't understand what it was. We now understand, fortunately we do. Last year, when the pandemic hit, I was the co-chair of the Northwest Seaport Alliance and the president of the Port of Tacoma Commission. We immediately went into action and undertook a whole series of steps when the pandemic was brand new to reach out to our customers. We did webinars every week. We had constant communication to assist them in moving goods. We opened up terminals that weren't open up for existing customers so that they could place their chassis and place other things. What we need to do in the future is some of the things we can control, those things that I've mentioned, some of those things that we can't control, such as the United States shipping laws. Most of our international carriers are foreign shipping lines, and the shipping laws are now being looked at to the extent that the international carriers need to do a fair process so that our goods are exported and our time schedules are kept. There are a whole series of things that we can do on that level to improve and increase the flow of traffic in the supply chain. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Mary, then Elizabeth, then John, then Don. And this is everyone's favorite topic, congestion. Congestion in and around I-5 from truck traffic, as well as aggressive and speeding truckers are a problem. Discuss the potential for use of rail and operating swing and graveyard shifts for trucks, as well as restricting trucks during peak commuter hours. Mary.
Thank you. I would love to see the Port of Tacoma expand its rail options so that we do decrease the congestion in and around the port. My husband is a longshoreman, and when I hear about a fatality down in the Port of Tacoma because a truck driver ran a red light or a truck driver failed to stop, I always wonder, is it one of our very valuable workers down there just simply trying to get to work? And so that's the same with these truck drivers. They're simply trying to perform a duty as well. What I would like to see is perhaps investing in an intermodal yard a little bit further outside of the Port of Tacoma, where we could use Tacoma Rail to transport these containers away from the hub, and then potentially even looking at scheduling for trucks to come into the yard instead of having a crush of them showing up at 7 o'clock in the morning. So if we could look at scheduling with these businesses, if we could work with these businesses about how could we improve production and what would it take to incentivize them to go to perhaps a 24-hour shift, or what kind of motivation is it going to take to get employees to work on swings and graves, because those are difficult shifts to fill without the proper motivation. So we have opportunities, but these are opportunities that we have to take in step and in tandem with our partners in the tide flats. So let's build those relationships, and let's continue to work on how we can decrease congestion and increase the quality of life in and around the Port of Tacoma. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth Pugh.
Thank you. So how can we deal with this congestion issue, which we all experience, whether we're involved in those day-to-day port operations or just trying to make our way around the South Sound? I don't want to totally piggyback and kind of take from what Mary has talked about, but I do think that, and I've heard some of these conversations as well, that this opportunity to kind of disperse and distribute, whether that is along time schedules or actually finding, some way to spread out geographically where a lot of that activity is happening so that we can make better use of our rail system is definitely something we should be looking at. Something else that comes up for me, though, when we talk about this, because so much of this really is going to come down to the workers who are working in our ports and working with these businesses in our port as well. And something else that we've seen through COVID is just really workers being pushed to the limit. Right. And so one of the things that we definitely need to take into consideration, and my kind of philosophy is the best way to take care of a business is to take care of the workers, because again, I believe most people want to do a good job. So the workers are going to have some ideas about what is going to be either that motivation, but also that self-care aspect. I do think this is very important whenever we have people on various kinds of shifts. I know we have some of that now, but if we were going to continue to expand upon that, especially when we have people moving large trucks and large heavy equipment, that we want to make sure that safety is maintained. So I think that's going to be looking at those employment practices and how we support our workers down at the port as well.
Thank you. John McCarthy.
Thank you once again. My focus has been recently primarily on transportation. And transportation systems and networks. Governor Inslee has appointed me twice now to serve on the Freight Mobility Strategic Investment Board. I'm one of 2 port representatives from the state on that board, looking at transportation opportunities to enhance our transport corridors so that we don't consume them just with trucks. Part of the problem in Tacoma stems from the fact that we used to send by rail about 70% of our imports. We were a gateway port, and rail is cleaner and avoids a lot of the truck congestion issues. Now we're at 50%, largely because of the competition from Canada. But what we are accomplishing, and it'll take time, is Highway 167, which was put in place a few years back, and it's being constructed right now. That will help. We've, in addition, created some hub areas, hub intermodal yards outside of the region, Minot, North Dakota, Pocatello, 2 examples. We're working on another one in Eastern Washington. But we do need to address truck congestion. Trucks can also bring us pollution. So everything we can do to improve our transportation corridors, work with the railroads, and work with our customers, create additional ingress and egress to the Central Peninsula roads, like opening up the 11th Street Bridge. I think there's a lot we can do to improve our current situation for the future.
Thank you. Don Meyer.
Thank you for the question. This is one of those topics where growth is good, but there's a consequence to growth. And we've got, I think as a port commissioner, we've got a responsibility to acknowledge the impact of growth. I see about 4 things that I would like to address in terms of the question. I believe we should open our terminals during off-peak hours. The idea is that you would basically bring a container from Ellensburg full of hay, you drop it off on an off-dock yard, and then they bring it in when it's off-peak hours. And that's my advocacy for extended gate hours during the weekend. I think a transportation management system throughout the tide flats is absolutely paramount. I cannot believe in this age of technology that we don't have such a system in place. And I'm an advocate, have been an advocate, and will continue to be an advocate to better manage traffic flows in and out of the tide flats. I made reference in my opening comments to finish the major transit corridors, SR 167 and Canyon Road. Those are major routes in and out of the tide flats for trucks. And the last thing is that Commissioner McCarthy is right. We've set up inland rail hubs, and the real purpose of that is to move cargo less on trucks and more on rail, not only is it more efficient in terms of cutting down the congestion in the tide flats, but it's also environmental friendly. So the idea of inland rail hubs is absolutely critical, I think, to the long-term success as to how you manage truck traffic in the tide flats and out of the tide flats. So thank you for the question. And it's a topic that we've got to get a better handle on. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Elizabeth, then John, then Don, then Mary. And the question is, if elected, what actions should the port take to address climate change? Elizabeth, please.
Yes. So as far as climate change, the first thing that I support is just putting a cap on any additional fossil fuel expansion in the port. I know this has been a conversation and kind of a debate that's been going on for quite a while, but I think before we can start looking at reduction, we just need to kind of put a cap on any more expansion, right? So we don't want to work against ourselves there. I will also say that this is something that I think we need to go to the experts and look to them. I know we do have a scientist in our midst today. I am not a scientist or a biologist or an engineer. And so I think there are some really promising things when you're looking at a variety of different, solar, hydrogen, hemp. There's a lot of things, but doing some more shifting, because I know we are using shore power at this point, continuing to expand that because that's not used all throughout the port at this point would be a step I would take. And then the rest of it would be really getting down to looking at what is the data telling us that is going to be most productive in this area, and then really working to make sure that we are working to have not just the physical infrastructure to make those energy changes, but also really working with our workforce so that we have good, solid, trained folks who can work in those industries and help transition, if that does mean transitioning away from other energy use.
Thank you. John. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Climate change is, of course, a world problem. It's a state problem. It's a regional problem. It's a country problem. So what part can we play in climate change is, I think it's significant. And we have undertaken some steps, much more work to do. We have moved to electrification of equipment on our terminals. We're heading in that direction. We have used shore power, for example, tote, which carries cargo between us and Alaska. We use shore power so we can plug in vessels. I think what was significant is after a lot of study and work and analysis, we adopted a clean air strategy just with early in this year, which has some substantial commitments by the Port of Tacoma, for example, not to build structures that are going to use natural gas and other fossil fuels to heat them. So we have taken some steps. The other thing that we need to continue to be is strong advocates with the United Nations, for example, which is connected to the International Maritime Organization, which is setting stricter standards long-term for vessels as they transport goods to our ports. And that's something we need to get in the middle of and make sure our position is known well. Thank you.
Thank you. Don.
Thank you for the question. I think climate change and the goals that the port has established are really important and consistent with the Paris Accord. When I think about climate change and the desire to reduce carbon footprint as well as the emission of greenhouse gases, I think of three things: ocean-going vessels, cargo handling equipment, and trucks. And what's interesting about the ocean-going vessels is Commissioner McCarthy is right. We have to be an advocate for cleaning up what it is those vessels are actually using when they come across the Pacific Ocean to our shores. And we don't control that, but we can be an advocate for stringent regulations. Cargo handling equipment, we're already on our way, but we still have a lot to do. On trucks, I'm very proud of our Clean Truck program. In fact, we just got an environmental award regarding the Clean Truck Program. And I am so proud of what we've been able to accomplish in terms of our efforts on air and reducing carbon and greenhouse gas emissions. But I think the biggest challenge we have in front of us in the area of expertise that I think I have, and that is, where are you going to get the funding for all of these lovely goals, all of these vision statements? And that's my area of expertise, because I think one of the things that I bring is the fact that I know how to combine environmental objectives with economic objectives. I've done that in my career when I was on the Fosk Waterway Development Authority. I've done that advocacy as a commissioner, and I'll continue to do that because I think that's the biggest issue we have in front of us. How are we going to afford this? We can all make statements on timelines, but you can't implement unless you have the money. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary.
Thank you. So we've talked about the air, but I haven't heard anyone talk about the water yet. So I would like to talk about sea level rise at the Port of Tacoma, with projections of an additional 1.5 feet of sea level by the year 2050, 30 years from now. And in the year 2100, we're talking about 4.5 feet of additional water during high emission scenarios. So as I referred to in my opening statement, these efforts to address these changes have not been identified for our tide flats. So when elected Commissioner number 4, I will call for the creation of the Port of Tacoma Climate Change Action Strategy. The strategy's goals will address climate change, and the concurrent infrastructure development will be inclusive, sustainable, and equitable. The objectives will include lower emission development, prepare for and respond to climate-related impacts, and support innovative solutions and sustainable technologies. Our long-term outcomes will establish lower emissions, increased resilience to climate change, and the promotion of economic development. And one of the ways that we can talk about taking steps to help pay for these changes, because I also am extremely fiscally responsible, is we have the Brownsfield Revitalization Act. We've got public law that allows us $1.3 million to study and then clean up areas. So we do have funds for them, and I would encourage you to vote for a scientist who's going to use those funds to make our areas just a little bit better. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question will start with John, then Dawn, then Mary, then Elizabeth. And the question is, how can the port ensure that its administration and workforce reflect the diversity of Pierce County? John.
Excuse me once again. I think we all had a pretty rude awakening last year after the murder of George Floyd. And I think society as a whole awoke to a long time problem, and many governments did as well. I think, and I was serving as president when that occurred, and our commission moved forward immediately to adopt a resolution for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and make it a significant part of our strategic planning efforts. And it was a significant part of the 5-year strategic planning plan that we just developed and we did that through a lot of citizen input last year. As a result of that effort, we actually prepared a report for the efforts that had been undertaken for the year 2020. And it's a diversity, equity, and inclusion report. And it's really has a lot of great data and information as to where we stand and what positive steps that we can do to move forward to make sure that our port and the organizations that function and work in the port are reflective of our community at large. The other thing that I personally was involved in recently was seeking and getting funds for an incubator project to assist people that in the past have not had the opportunity to learn about international trade and hopefully open up new opportunities for a diverse group. So much to do. I'm glad to see we've awakened to the challenge. I certainly hope we step forward and take positive steps. Thank you.
Thank you. Dawn.
Thank you for a very relevant question in today's debate with regards to service in the public sector. I think that when I think about the issue, I think it's multi-level in nature. There was Commissioner McCarthy made a reference to policy. I think that's a very important statement as decision makers, to start with a policy that sends a message to our organization and to the community. I think also what's missing, though, is I would like to take that policy, create accountability around it, and then have a community report with, let's say, the Black Collective or other groups that are basically feel they're underrepresented in terms of the port's activities. So we can get direct input from those that are involved in our community in a meaningful way. The other thing is I'm very supportive of the Maritime Blue concept that's come to the Tide Flats located in the urban waters, and their ability and focus around educational opportunities, as well as the incubator program for underrepresented businesses. I like that approach. I think we need to look at it not only from a job perspective, but also from a business perspective. And so that's what I meant by multi-level. The other conclusion I would have is that I think it's important that we reach out to the community in a significant way. And that's one of the reasons why I'm advocating for a citizens advisory group at the Port of Tacoma, made up of populations that perhaps feel they're underrepresented, and our ability to reach directly and reach citizen groups in a meaningful way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. So as Port Commissioners, we must make a strong statement against racism and racial injustice, and we must start from within. So when elected Port Commissioner number 4, I will propose a motion similar to what was proposed at the Port of Seattle, directing the Executive Director to examine port operations and policies for racial biases and discrimination. So before we talk about creating new policies, let's look at the policies that we currently have in place and figure out if they're working for us in the climate that we really want to foster. And then let's evolve to eliminate inequity through port programs and these same policies. I would also modify the port's current diversity, equity, and inclusion statement by striking the words, "the principles of," because we don't need to be demonstrating the principles. What the port needs to clearly state very concisely and succinctly is, the port supports diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout our organization and our community. And these are changes that I would like to make as your next Port Commissioner. So thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. So when we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, what we're really talking about in this case is a factor of economic justice. And when we're looking at issues of economic justice, what we're really looking at is making sure that everyone has an opportunity to participate and to benefit from economic opportunities. What I think we have talked about, and by we, I mean predominantly a white mainstream American culture, has often been about, policies that directly excluded people, about tokenism. And I think we're really beyond that point at this point. And what we need to talk about is, if someone's not in the room, asking the question, why? Why aren't you in the room? Do you not feel that this is somewhere that you can participate? Is this something that you didn't know about? So to the question of getting more information, I think that is absolutely what we need to do. And I think there are a lot of organizations that are already doing this work in our community here in Pierce County. And I've also seen in King County as well that have partnered with the Port of Seattle as well. I think it's also really a striking observation to say that this is also why we need to have more diversity in leadership, because these are not new issues. They're just new to those of us who are not affected by them. And so it's really important that we do have diverse leadership at the port so that we have those perspectives included in just regular conversations. And it's not something that we're feeling like we're addressing a special interest group. We are all in this community and all of our interests are tied together, and we should be acting like that when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Don, then Mary, then Elizabeth, then John. Many people have expressed concerns about the LNG plant from an environmental and from a safety perspective. How would you respond to their concerns about safety and environmental impacts? Don.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that question. It's a very relevant question in terms of the discussions we've had in the community ever since this idea came forth. First of all, on the environmental side, I view liquefied natural gas as a transition fuel. It's not the end result. It's not the ultimate conclusion, and therefore we can say we won because it's still a fossil fuel. But one thing that LNG does, there's no dispute, and it's a fact, it doesn't emit diesel particulate matter. Diesel particulate matter by the World Health Organization, those small diesel particulate matter particles, if you inhale those, you have a real problem. It's called cancer. So I will suggest to you, it's a transition fuel. It's better for the environment, and it's certainly better for our local community, as far as I'm concerned, because when we talk about environmental impacts, my priority is talk about it from the local perspective and then move beyond that. The other thing I would suggest to you is on the safety issue. There's another liquefied natural gas facility in Plymouth, Washington. I went there because there was an incident. Went there with the fire chief. And out of all of this, I was very much an advocate for standing up the fire station that you see there. It is fully manned, talking to the fire chief. And so I'm very happy that not only is that station operating, but the individuals there are trained. And that's one of the things we discovered in Plymouth was, can you imagine a huge facility and none of the firefighters were trained on the facility itself? So that's would be my answer on the safety issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary.
Thank you. For LNG safety issues, I feel it would be appropriate to update our tide flat safety plan, which was put into place in 2016. And also, we don't have emergency evacuation routes that have been updated out of the tide flats since 2009. So those are two issues I immediately see that we need to address promptly that would alleviate some of the emergency response pressure. But then to that point, the city of Tacoma did not fund a fire engine for the brand new fire station directly across the street from the LNG plant that was built in order to help the residents feel more secure in the operation of this plant. So it's been mentioned that firefighters are trained on this. And right now we have a fire station with no firefighters and no firefighters trained on it. So the other aspect I would like to work on as your commissioner is getting that fire station manned and getting our firefighters the appropriate training and the appropriate tools they need in case there's a critical emergency down there in our tide flats. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Thank you. So I'll just briefly speak to safety because I think there are a lot of things that we need to talk about in terms of how do we actually do this safely. You know, basically what we've seen with LNG elsewhere is that it's safe, you know, most of the time until it isn't. And so we do absolutely need to have those safety and kind of crisis plans in place. I think for me, the bigger issue is kind of the primary one for me, which is whether or not this is and has been the correct move from an environmental standpoint. And that's really where I take more issue. Talking about LNG as a transition in 2021, to me is just a little bit, it's just, you know, too late and not quite enough. As I said, a lot of these things we've been talking about with environmental conservation, climate change, this is really literally in my lifetime. And I'm a middle-aged woman, but in my lifetime, we have literally been talking about these issues as long as I can remember. I am now in a point in my life where I have lived more time in the 21st century than the 20th century, which was a realization I had recently. And so what I'm really thinking about is the future for those people who are going to be living more of their lives in the 21st century, where really all of us as adults have kind of let them down by not addressing these issues with more relevant and urgent action sooner. And so I would like us to just move forward with an urgency that matches the danger that we are facing due to climate change now, and not taking transitional or half measures.
Thank you. John?
Thank you. I guess let me start by saying substantial actions generally take a great deal of time to think through and accomplish. The LNG facility, for example, was proposed to the Port of Tacoma by Governor Inslee. And we know Governor Inslee is a strong environmental activist and has adopted carbon fuel standards as one of his priorities. I say that because attitudes change, information changes, and it takes time to change perspectives. In the 4 years that I have been on the Port Commission, I have not once had a vote on LNG. The original vote took place before I took office. What I do know is that there's been a policy adopted at the port to prohibit the export or an export facility for fossil fuel. I do know, since I did take office, I undertook it upon myself to study the safety issue carefully because I live within 5 miles. I went, looked at it before construction was near complete. I went through it, stood in it, talked to people that were involved in it, talked about what would happen in the event of an earthquake, what would happen under different scenarios. And I was very and quite impressed with the answers I received and the technology that's been utilized in the completion of that facility. LNG is much cleaner than the diesel fuel that was being utilized by Totem Ocean Trailer Express. It will be much better for our region and community than what was in existence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next question, we'll start with Mary, then Elizabeth, then John, then Don. What are your priorities for environmental cleanup and natural areas restoration? Mary.
My priorities for environmental cleanup is the utilization of the Brownsfield Act so that we start actually taking care of these properties instead of waiting to litigate folks that we might not be able to bring cases against. We have lots of parcels that are tiny that we could perhaps rehabilitate, remediate, and we could begin to use those perhaps in a recreational facility, and an aspect that we could capitalize on where maybe we bring new kinds of businesses, a new retail down to the waterfront. So I would like to see Brownsfield's money used in identifying and remediation. I would like to see nearshore habitats restored. I understand, there's options for dredge material, but with dredge material, it all depends on testing. So we can't promise that material until we know how it comes out toxicologically. So nearshore habitats, I would love to see eelgrass restoration, but that is extremely expensive, very time consuming. But if there were, perhaps we could do pilot studies where we could look at that, because eelgrass is as important to our climate as trees are. And so those, one of the many aspects of preserving our estuarine environment, and that's what I intend to do, is bring my experience as an environmental scientist that has remediated and been a part of these processes to help restore, rehabilitate, remediate, and start using our contaminated lands. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
So from my standpoint, I think, when you look at the strategic plan that the port has for the next, for this 5-year period, one of the main items in there pertains to the environment. However, there is some language that kind of suggests that we will take care of the environment as long as it doesn't bug business too much. And I think in the long term, it's actually a very conservative, fiscal conservative standpoint to take care of our environment. The local environment here, we've talked about climate change already, the local environment here, including, wetlands and different areas that the port controls or is involved with, is a big part of why people live in this area of the world, right? There's a lot of the beauty and the outdoor adventureness of living in the Pacific Northwest. And so we want to maintain that. One of the things I've also noticed is that in addition to staff at the port that are maintaining these areas, there are also have been a number of volunteer activities. And although I do support volunteer activities, bringing in community members to participate in maintenance of these properties, it also begs the question of whether or not we actually have the full capacity of staffing that we need to actually upkeep these properties. And that's something that I would look at.
Thank you. John? Unmute yourself.
I'll figure out that button probably about the time we're done. So thank you. But one of the things I've been impressed with in the 4 years that I've returned to the Port Commission is the staff that we have, the environmental staff that we have. The history of the port, I was involved in the port back when it was declared a Superfund site about 40 years ago. And I was involved in some of the initial efforts to create fishing habitat and artificial wetlands. And I will say that the remediation of contaminated lands, there were bad decisions made after World War II and a lot of chemicals taken down in the tide flats. And the port's been in the process over the last 40 years, and they've spent about $270 million cleaning up land to make it productive so it can be put to use. For example, we took the old Kaiser site, $70 million was to clean it up, spent to clean it up, and we were able to put in a automobile importer, Wilhelmsen, and to utilize that land. So the port kind of leverages the grants and funds, and the port does apply for grants and funds, leverages those funds with its own funds, with its own borrowing, because we receive a tax that we can utilize for the cleanup. And the port has done a tremendous job of remediation, fisheries habitat. We're just right in the middle now of a very important and very expensive Yakima Creek project, which you can see along Highway 509, which will be a tremendous asset for all of our community and help in the fisheries arena. Thank you.
Thank you. Don?
Thank you for the question. And I think it's a very relevant question, particularly for me. First of all, I would say on the remediation side, cleaning up sites and then having a redevelopment occur. I've been involved with hundreds of acres in the tide flats in my previous role at the Port of Tacoma staff and the Floss Waterway development that I was involved with now as a commissioner. So I'm very proud of the ability that we take a site, and as Commissioner McCarthy has said, the Kaiser site is a classic example of cleaning it up and then have an economic development capability as a revenue stream to help pay for that cleanup. That's how we keep the property tax low. That's what I think taxpayers expect us to do. Deploy the assets in such a way that you can basically improve the ability for job creation and an environmental objective. So I'm very proud of my track record involved with cleaning up and remediating contaminated lands. The other thing in terms of priorities, fish habitat. Without any question, that's a priority of mine because for a long time, my conversations I've had with the Puyallup tribe, fish habitat is not only culturally significant, but it's a treaty right of the Puyallup tribe. And I'm an advocate for that, and I will focus energy around that. The other part I would suggest to you is that I'm very proud of the port's program. It's called a mitigation bank. I don't have time to explain it, but that's first ever. As a leader, we've created a mitigation bank where improvements in habitat and fish habitat in particular is made before we actually do a project that would change it. So I'm proud of our leadership. I'm proud of the fact that we are able to clean up hundreds of acres of contaminated land for this generation that I'm responsible for. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question will be 60 seconds, Susan. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to get 2 more questions in before we end. And we're going to start with Elizabeth, then John, then Dawn, then Mary. And this is a 60-second question. What would you do to increase public engagement in the Port Commission? Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Thank you. So yes, I think this is actually a fundamentally important thing for us to do with the port. When I go out and talk to people, honestly, the first thing that people ask me, is what does the port commissioner do? But then if they don't work in the port or have a family member who works in the port, they actually can't tell me a whole lot about what is happening at the port or how their taxes are being used or how this relates to the day-to-day life. And so I think it is very important for us to do that. I think that we have seen that we need to take multiple approaches as it continues to get safer to interact in person. I know there has been discussions about having, commission meetings or different kinds of meetings in different locations throughout the county. I think if you're not down where you can view the port, sometimes it's out of sight, out of mind. But I think we also need to continue to use technology such as Zoom, social media, to engage folks who are more comfortable with those methods and are just going to see those more in their day-to-day lives. Building on the citizen advisory groups that have been used for various projects would also be a suggestion.
Thank you. John.
Yes, thank you. 60 seconds. When we did the strategic plan, and we took all of last year when I was president of the commission to do the strategic plan, we hired a new executive director to kind of lead the effort. We created 5 pillars, 5 important principles. Community connections was one of them. And we focused on what we've done and what we could do in the future. We do boat tours now. We do bus tours. We have an extensive presentation engagement process with community groups that all the commissioners do. We have things such as coffee with the commissioner type events. We're engaged through an economic development fund to support community organizations that support international trades and things of that nature. What can we do? We just had a robust conversation at our retreat just a month ago, and to develop an implementation plan to enhance what we do, because indeed we are a county organization, and indeed a lot of people in the county have no clue as to the port's role in their lives. So much can be done and much has been done. Thank you.
Thank you. Don.
Thank you. I won't repeat a lot of what Commissioner McCarthy said because I certainly support the actions we've taken. I would probably say the one thing, though, that I would have always been an advocate for, because the Port of Tacoma boundaries is Pierce County wide. So I like the idea, and I want to emphasize the idea of having commission meetings outside of the Tide Flats area as one of the ways to come out and find out what communities are thinking about on a countywide basis. The other thing that I would suggest is that I'm an advocate for setting up a citizens advisory group. I think it's time that we actually created that, and the participation or involvement could be from groups that are underrepresented to youth. And it's a great way to bring in, let's say, a college level individuals to come in and find out more about the Port of Tacoma in an organized way, and also an ability to use them as a sounding board for issues at hand. As we, 5 commissioners, consider issues, I think it's good that we have the ability to go to a formalized advisory group and ask for their input. So that's what I'll only add to what Commissioner McCarthy said. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary.
Thank you. What I really enjoyed in part of this candidacy is the interactions with the neighborhood councils and the legislative districts. So what I would like to see is that we continue to interact with those groups instead of waiting to be invited, because so many of these programs for our commissioners, you must request. So instead of requesting, just be available. And as has been mentioned before, with the different types of formats and the technologies that are available to us, we can absolutely call in remotely and be a part of any group's discussion. And just being present and being available, I think, is going to speak volumes to what the commissioners can do for the county, because when we go out and listen, that has a lot more weight than waiting for someone to invite us. So I would encourage more proactive engagement rather than waiting to be engaged. So thank you.
Thank you. This is the last question, and we'll start with John, then Dawn, then Mary, then Elizabeth. What are your priorities to promote or facilitate recreation in the Tide Flats and in Commencement, in and around Commencement Bay? John.
Oh, you're talking to the right person there. I currently have used the Foss Waterway for paddling for 20 years. I've paddled dragon boats on the Foss for 20 years. I paddle outrigger canoes for 15 years. What I've attempted to undertake is to, and we're in the process of developing future plans of the Wheeler-Osgood waterway, which runs into the Foss. The Foss is a unique body of water. All the major port cities in the world that have a body of water running through it take advantage of it and create access to that waterway and use it as a place where you can highlight kind of a working industrial area at the same time bring people down to the water. So I am passionate about bringing people to that waterway, either in a new structure, new infrastructure, new interpretive center, in creating boat ramps, other methods to give people an opportunity to get on the water and enjoy the water. When I was first in the port and had been declared a Superfund site, I would fall in the water as I was a longshore worker, and I didn't realize how contaminated it was. So it's been substantially improved, and we need to get and improve opportunities for people to enjoy that water.
Thank you. Don.
Yes, this is a very interesting question to me because Commissioner McCarthy talked about the Foss Waterway. The beauty in the tide flats is we have the Foss Waterway as a recreational use area. We just got to figure out how to get full benefit of it. And I'm an advocate for a maritime center on the port property that the port owns on the east side of the Foss Waterway, and for full implementation of a variety of uses, whether it's human powered or fully powered. Boat launches, those sorts of things, I'm an advocate for in the Foss Waterway, because I think the benefit we have in the tide flats is we need to complete the vision of the Foss Waterway as an area that has public access. Whether you just enjoy looking at the water and completing, let's say, a trail around the Foss Waterway connecting to the Murray Morgan Bridge is an advocacy I have. And I'm very excited about the port's deliberation on a maritime center. And I think that's a great way, whether it's a cultural part of a facility for recognizing the Puyallup tribe's role and the fact that we're on their reservation. So I'm looking forward to a new facility that reflects the community values of what we've had historically as well as going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. So I would like to see our waterfront be capitalized with people-powered machines. And it's been inspired by what I've seen down at Point Ruston to see the families out there and those little bicycles riding up and down the blacktop. So I would like to see some pedal-powered equipment out on the water that folk can rent from a vendor who has a permit, who perhaps leases the space for a seasonal basis, and is able to accommodate families, individuals, parties, and use the waterway recreationally with tools that a lot of us don't have. If you don't have a stand-up paddleboard, if you don't have a kayak, there's a lot of recreational activities that we could take down in the waterfront that wouldn't include the introduction of any more petroleum products, because that's another product that we still don't have a handle on in our tide flats is point source pollution. So I like to intelligently use the water and make sure that, we also have rinsing off stations so that when people come out, they can get hit with some fresh water and not have to leave with a bunch of seawater on them. But, start to make these changes and these provisions so that as it gets warmer with climate change, we're going to have more people hitting the water. So what can we do to make that easier, healthier, and safer? Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
All right. So with this past summer, when we did see those really, really high temperatures that kind of spike, which is kind of foreboding or foreshadowing, I think, for some climate change that we're going to be seeing in the future, we did absolutely see families all over the area jump into the nearest body of water. So we definitely know that these spaces are being used recreationally. I think we've also seen some of that benefit from what has been done with the Foss Waterway, with Point Ruston. And I think that is definitely the direction that we want to continue to develop so that there are those community spaces. I know this was something that was discussed by the citizen advisory group that was advising for the interim regulations. And so this is something that has been asked for from the community. And I think that looking at things like arts, culture, heritage, and science also fits in really well with programs that the city of Tacoma has put out there, like the Tacoma Creates program, that these are things that we recognize. We have vibrant arts community, we have vibrant, heritage and culture in the area, and we have those opportunities to learn scientifically more about the area that we live, and I'd like to see those incorporated.
Thank you. Now it's time for closing statements. Each of you have up to 1 minute, and the order will be Mary Bacon, then Elizabeth Pugh, then John McCarthy, and then Don Meyer. So Mary.
Thank you, League of Women Voters and TV Tacoma. The Port of Tacoma is a part of the nation's largest autonomous public enterprise, and our Port Commission has a responsibility to promote economic development and oversee the port's evolution and operation. I'm seeking your support to elect a practical scientist to represent you at the Port of Tacoma. Why me? Because I will present a viewpoint that we do not currently have within our commission, a scientific perspective based on over 15 years of professional scientific experience. How will this improve our commission's performance? By including an original perspective in port conversations, the dialogue becomes more diverse and comprehensive. The Port of Tacoma has existed for over a century, and with my leadership experience and foresight, I will ensure our working waterfront continues for another 100 years. I encourage you to visit my website, votebaconforport.com, and I appreciate the opportunity to share with you why I am running. In conclusion, go Mariners, and thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth Pugh, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to address these questions in this audience this afternoon. Looking back over my career, guiding and supporting career development for employees and job seekers has been my profession, but also my passion. And some of the things that I've learned from this work that I think are relevant to the work I can do as a commissioner at the port are that, one, taking care of workers is the best way to take care of an organization, because people want to do good in the world, and we are there as leaders to make sure that we can remove barriers and to also set policy and set expectations so that people know what they're trying to achieve together. That individuals want to have opportunities to grow, develop, learn, and excel, often in new areas, but that we often also don't like change if it's not our idea. So as leaders, it is really our job to get ahead of the changes that are being driven by global trends and climate. We need a commitment of a vision for yes and when it comes to the environment and to jobs. And we need to provide multiple pathways forward so that our residents can make choices for themselves and their own careers and businesses. I believe we are up to the challenge of building a more equitable, sustainable, and collaborative port. And I would love for you to join me in this work of becoming good ancestors to the generations to come.
Thank you. John McCarthy.
Thank you. We truly are blessed. We're very fortunate to have the Port of Tacoma in our community. It has been an economic engine for Pierce County for over 100 years. I think our estimates are that perhaps $3 billion of economic activity is created through the Northwest Seaport Alliance, which is the partnership between Tacoma and Seattle to run our marine terminals. Over 42,000 jobs. We create millions of dollars in taxes that go to fire, police, libraries, all sorts of other schools, things of that nature. So we're fortunate. I'm fortunate. My grandfather worked in the tide flats 100 years ago on a shipyard. My father worked in the tide flats in a shipyard 75 years ago, then as a longshore worker. I am passionate about the port. I am proud to have served as your Port of Tacoma commissioner for these last 4 years, and then earlier before I was a judge. I'm all about economic development, creation of jobs, and doing it in a very responsible fashion so that we do preserve and protect our environment and make it a place for all of us to enjoy. Thank you. Please vote for me in November.
Thank you. Don Meyer.
Thank you very much. I'm Don Meyer. I'm running for position 4 for re-election. This position, I've enjoyed being a part of the generation that has cleaned up and is cleaning up the tide flats. Commencement Bay is a natural deep water harbor, and it basically connects us to the global economy. And I am happy and pleased and proud to be a part of the activities of the Port of Tacoma and beyond in terms of the greater community. We've used terms today: sustainable, equitable, growth impacts, trucks, environment, fish habitat, a variety of topics that I think are all very, very relevant and very important in terms of how we decide those issues as we go forward. But I believe fundamentally that retaining a working waterfront with a keen eye on sustainable business practices is the great way of the future, in the most significant way we can address climate change. I'm committed to that. I believe fully that we can accomplish that if we keep our focus and our priorities straight. Thank you, and please vote Don Meyer, position number 4, Port of Tacoma. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, and thank you all. John McCarthy and Laura Gilbert are the candidates for Port Commission Position 1, Don Meyer and Mary Bacon for Position 4, and Dick Marzano and Elizabeth Pugh for Position 2. I'd like to thank the candidates who were able to join us: the timekeeper, Susan Eidenshank, Tacoma Pierce County League of Women Voters, TV Tacoma, and Affordable Housing Consortium. And thank you for watching. You can see other League of Women Voter candidate forums at www.tacomapiercelwv.org. Read your voter's pamphlet and look at vote411.org. That's vote411.org, where you can find answers to questions posed to all candidates running for office. Read the candidates' websites and do all that you can to be an educated voter. And don't forget to vote before November 2nd. Thank you all and have a wonderful day.